Joining me on the phone, I think this might be like a hat trick this week for Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, if I'm not mistaken. Our friend, Deputy Counsel for Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, Dan Lennington. Good morning, Dan. How are you?
Good morning, Meg. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Well, I appreciate that you're taking some time, especially I know some people might consider this early morning, but you do not know early mornings until you get up when I do. That's for sure. And we always hope, we cross our fingers that there's someone listening at 5 a.m. when we go on the air. Sometimes I wonder. But, well, thank you for joining me. Let's talk about, I know that, I've had, as I said, a number of guests on from Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, including Rick Essenberg yesterday. But let's talk about what the latest Biden administration, I don't know if you want to call it blunder. I mean, I think it's deliberate what they are trying to do.
Yes, so the Biden administration has created a new federal agency. Now, this hasn't been widely reported in the press, and you would think that when a new agency is created, there'd be all sorts of fanfare. I mean, when we were all much younger, we remembered when the Department of Homeland Security was created right after 9/11, and everybody touted that and said, well, this is the first new federal agency created in many, many years. And so now, 2023, we have a new federal agency again, but we don't have the same level of fanfare. This agency is called the Minority Business Development Agency. And as you can imagine, this is really the cornerstone of Biden's so-called equity agenda. Now, the Biden equity agenda, to remind your listeners, is an agenda that places race at the pinnacle of all policymaking decisions. And so the Biden administration believes that because of systemic racism in America, we have to give special treatment to certain minorities and not other races. And until some magical time in the future, when all outcomes among all races and all categories are exactly the same, we must keep giving racial preferences to people. Now, this particular new agency, it does just what it says. It helps businesses. It helps businesses with lending, financing, with worker training. It helps the agency helps people with government contracting issues. It helps with networking. It places people on certain directories where they can get more business. But we have three clients who all own businesses. One is a contracting business in Florida. One is a health center in Texas. And one is an architecture firm up in Kiel, Wisconsin. And these three men who own these businesses went to the website for some assistance from the government to help them develop their business, to grow their business, to get advice and networking and financing, and discovered that they had to check a box. They had to check a box that said that they were Black, Asian, Native American, or Hispanic. But they didn't fit any of those boxes, and so they couldn't actually get any help from this new agency. This agency does not help any businesses owned by white individuals. It does not actually help any businesses owned by minorities who come from North Africa or the Middle East, for example. So if your parents grew up in Egypt and you own a restaurant and you'd like some help from the MBDA, the Minority Business Development Agency, you're not going to get any help because purely where your parents came from, the Biden administration believes that those people from the Middle East, North Africa, they're actually white, and the Biden administration doesn't want to help anybody who is white. And so we have filed a lawsuit in the Northern District of Texas down in Dallas, and we are challenging this agency under the U.S. Constitution because the Constitution guarantees what's called the equal protection of the laws. Now, this is really a foundational aspect of our Constitution. It means that when there is a law, like a law that sets up a new agency, it must treat all Americans equally without regard to race. And this is a fundamental tenet of our liberties in America. And it may, in my opinion, is probably the most important right. It's even more important than the First Amendment or the Second Amendment. It is a right that says the government's got to treat you equally based on race, because if they can treat you differently based on race, then they can give people different preferences under the First Amendment. Freedom of speech and freedom of religion can be different based on your race, or your right to bear arms can be different. Or as we saw with the student loan forgiveness program, the Biden administration can tailor the program in a way to benefit one race over another. And so really it's a foundational tenet of American society is that the government, when it interacts with us, must treat us equally. And we've sued on behalf of these businesses to demand equal treatment.
Surely the Biden administration wants every business owner to succeed in this country, and not just those that are non-white business owners, right, Dan?
You would hope so. We're living in a time where our government has run out of money. Our government is spending money it doesn't have. And when a business succeeds, and a lot of your listeners are out there probably working on their business right now. Maybe they're a contractor or they're a delivery driver, and they're listening to this, and they're making money and paying taxes, and those taxes are going to fund the government. So you would assume that those people running the government would want all those people to do well, but apparently not. Apparently, this issue of race has been so politicized by the Democrats in particular that they think that the only way for them to stay in power is to keep this boogeyman of racism out there, so they can still keep scaring people into voting the way that they want them to vote.
You know, it seems as if those who try so hard to claim that they aren't racist and make such a big deal out of how someone looks on the outside, the color of their skin, they themselves are the ones that have that problem. So I guess what I have to ask, and I mean this is somewhat facetious, or probably 100% facetious, is there's got to be a federal agency that is dedicated to only helping white business owners, right?
No, absolutely not. And if there was such an agency, we at the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty would challenge that as fast as you can believe, because we don't want racial preferences for anybody. Any race, no race should get racial preferences. And if there was any discrimination against a minority and they came to will, we would be Johnny on the spot with a lawsuit in the same way, because what we need to do is advance America towards a colorblind society and a colorblind set of rules, so that we can all view each other not as members of racial groups, but as individuals, about who you are as a person, where you come from, what your interests are, what your likes and dislikes are. All those things are unique to individuals, and we should never just lump everybody in a category and say, well, because you are a certain color, you need extra help. When I was younger, we used to call that a stereotype. And you're not supposed to have stereotypes about how certain races act or what certain races have as deficiencies. But yet the Biden administration does it every day, and they get away with it. But not anymore. This is our 8th lawsuit against the Biden administration. We've won 3 so far, and we got 5 pending, and we are just going to march down and win all 8 of these.
All right. I'd like to hear that. So you said something about unique individuals, and I've had the privilege and opportunity to meet many business owners here in central Wisconsin, and each one of them has a unique story, and it's something to be I think it's something to be heralded by those of us who don't own businesses, to see what all goes into the individual's story about why they decided to start their own business. And your 3 plaintiffs each have unique stories. Can you talk a little bit about one of them is this Christian Bruckner from Tampa, Florida. Can you talk a little bit about his individual unique experience?
Yeah, Christian Bruckner came here from Romania. He is a Romanian immigrant, and he came here specifically because his family was escaping communism, when he was younger, and his parents wanted a better life for him in a place that valued, guess what, equality under the law, because they didn't value equality under the law in communist Romania. And he came here for a better life and to enjoy the freedoms that we have, the freedom of speech and the right to bear arms and the right to due process and equal protection of the laws and all those things that we value every day, although maybe we don't think about them every day. But then he came here, and when he was a teenager, before he was going to college, he got in a horrible car crash, and he is now permanently disabled. But yet he has started his own business. He has a disability. He lives in what's called a historically underutilized business zone in Tampa, which is an area that had recently been devastated by a hurricane. And so on the liberal side, you would see this person say, well, he's an immigrant, check. He's disabled, check. He works in an underutilized business zone, check. Well, based on my scheme of identity politics, this person should get all sorts of advantages. But no, not even under their beliefs about how the world should work are they going to give him any advantages. But yes, he has a unique story, and he's got our other plaintiffs have unique stories. Matt Piper from Kiel, Wisconsin, grew up in extreme poverty in Denver, and worked his way up to get a master's degree from the University of Colorado, and is now an architect and owns his architecture business. He should be treated as an individual, and the government, when they look at all three of these plaintiffs, should not say, well, you're white, so therefore we're not helping you because all white people have advantages. And it's like, I imagine that there are some people listening today who are out there working hard and trying to make ends meet and saying, hey, I don't have any. I was not born with a silver spoon in my mouth just because I'm white. Because, in America, we can all aspire to work hard and get a leg up based on our own merit. And we should not be labeled as this or that based on something as irrelevant as race.
Well, and how insulting for any non-white person to be characterized or categorized by how they look on the outside because they have more melanin in their skin than someone who's white. None of us choose our race. I mean, as far as I know, I don't know if that's yet been a thing now, is that you can now appropriate different races. I don't know what pronouns you'd use for that, but it's very frustrating. Are you, Dan Lennington from Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, are you confident that you will see positive results from this latest lawsuit against the Biden administration?
Yes, I'm very confident. We've had great success in the past. As some of your listeners may remember, we received a nationwide injunction against what was called the Farmer Loan Forgiveness Program, which is it forgave loans to farmers, but not white farmers. We won that case. There was a scheme to give out COVID relief to certain restaurant owners, but not white restaurant owners, and we won that case down in Tennessee. We've won cases all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court when we got the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn a decision in Wisconsin about racial gerrymandering. Remember that the Wisconsin Supreme Court was going to allow lines to be drawn based on race for our elections, and we got that decision overturned, which gave us the maps that we have now, which are fair because they're legal. Now, we have heard a lot about our maps in this upcoming election and the invocation of the term fair, but I would say that judges need to determine whether something is legal and it complies with the law rather than their personal beliefs about fairness.
Wow. Well, that was a really good segue because we just have about a minute or so left, and I wanted to ask about your reaction to the debate yesterday between former Justice Dan Kelly and No Jail Janet Protasewicz. What's your summation?
Well, of course, I cannot endorse any candidates, but I think that if somebody's undecided, this debate was about 50 minutes long. You can watch it on YouTube. I think it's really summed up. There was a question about the maps, and Judge Janet said, well, everybody knows that those maps, the maps that draw our legislative districts, everybody knows that those are not fair and they need to be overturned. And Justice Kelly was asked the same question, and he said, well, there are certain requirements for legislative maps. In the Constitution, they have to have equal proportion of voters. They have to be compact and contiguous, and that's what the law says, and they have to comply with the Voting Rights Act. And if this case came before me, I would look at what the law was, and I would apply the law to the particular case. And Judge Janet says, I'm going to overturn the maps because they're not fair. So those are two different types of ways to be, two types of ways to wield the judicial power. I'm not going to say that's a way to be a judge, because one way is actually a judge and the other way is activist. But voters can decide what they would like for themselves. Would they like the Wisconsin Supreme Court to be a super legislature that just gets to decide whatever it thinks is, quote, fair or according to their, quote, values? Some people might like that. They can vote that way. And other people might like a more traditional role of a judge, which is to decide particular cases and controversies and apply the law that we all know that we have and apply it equally to everybody without regard to race, color, or creed, and to respect the amendments to the Constitution and the way that we do things for certainty and due process and all sorts of things that we value in America. But that's really, that debate and that question in particular, what are you going to do about the legislative map? That will tell you all you need to know about the candidates. And, there will be about 1.5 million votes cast. There might be 2 million votes cast, which is far less than was cast last year in the November election. So there's lots of votes out there. If everybody showed up who voted for, Josh Call or Eric Toney for either side, whoever that candidate was supported by, that person would win in a blowout, because there's lots of votes out there, but there's lots of people who aren't going to vote. And so if people would like have a place, have participation in their own democracy, this is the time to do it.
So I got to ask, and then I got to let you go. So did the childish Janet, after she exclaimed, "Wah, not fair," did the moderator give her a lollipop? It's amazing to me the difference between the adult running for the state Supreme Court and the child, and it's so very clear and obvious to me. Well, Dan Lennington from the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, thank you so much for all the work that you do on behalf of the law here in Wisconsin. I look forward to our next conversation. Have a great week.
You too, Meg. Thank you.